next speaker is Keith Strier from Ernst & Young. Me and Keith had a conversation on the phone. We were talking about unicorns and snake oil, and we're kind of on the same page about what's going on. So I think that I invited Keith to come and speak to give some insights into things to think about for this business. And so he's going to come up here and impart some good knowledge on us. Let's hear it for Keith Strier.
Thank you.
Hey, no problem. Here's your laser and your laser.
Oh, I got laser, huh?
You got 20 minutes.
All right, you got it. All right, let's see what we got here. Good morning. Thanks, Patrick. As you mentioned, we've had a couple conversations. Patrick, you mentioned I'm a partner at Ernst & Young. I lead our innovation and digital enterprise strategy practice, but I'm not here to talk about consulting, and I'm not here to talk about advisory services. I'm actually here as a fellow drone enthusiast, someone also passionate about digital technology, and picked up on sort of the trend of the consumer devices becoming more interesting to our enterprise customers about a year ago, and was just sort of tracking it as a hobby on the side. It wasn't, well, it's still not eating up any considerable part of my time as far as clients go, but the potential is enormous. And it reminded me of something that I experienced 5 years ago, which was when the iPad first came out. And I remember when the iPad first came out, I got a hold of it, and it didn't seem heavy at the time. The first one is heavy now when you hold it, right? But there was something about the iPad when I first got it in 2010. It had no enterprise story around it. It wasn't deployed as an enterprise tool, right? It kind of was a consumer platform. I don't think there were any enterprise applications on it or apps, but I just felt it. At the time, for me, it was like a Sputnik moment. I felt that the iPad was going to be a transformational device for the enterprise, so I started looking at opportunities and looking for ways to build some apps on it, again, right in the sort of first year it came out. And by 2011, I had developed several apps for my company at the time, to help them manage their travel and help them do some other things. And 2 or 3 years later, by 2013, this was over. I mean, clearly the iPad had become this big hit in the enterprise, but it wasn't clear in day one. And similarly with drones, the industrial applications are popping up left and right today. But 2 years ago, it wasn't as clear. Certainly, you couldn't fill a room like this. But the iPad had a distinct advantage over drones, right? Because they came into a world where the iPhone already existed. It layered onto that environment. It was another extension of that existing platform, a completely different tool, completely different form factor, but there was sort of a natural way to take advantage of that. Drones don't have the same opportunity inside the industrial space. So what I've started to see over the last year, and this is where Patrick and I found some mutual sort of common ground, is that there's so much enthusiasm on the use cases, and I have it as well. And there's so much interest and innovation on the vehicles. And there's all this excitement around the potential. But what's not really happening as much, and this is just from my vantage point as an advisor to the world's largest industrial companies and media companies, just pick your favorite Fortune 500 brand, they're not grasping, they being your customers, the companies who will scale, the future buyers of drone fleets, they have not fully grasped what it's going to take to be a user of that technology. And this is not true just of drones. This is true even of iPads and tablets and smartphones. And that's sort of this aha moment that I had last year. And as I started going around talking to clients about this, and they weren't necessarily calling up and asking about it, I would just bring it up. They would immediately go, yeah, we're thinking about that. Actually, we got someone in our innovation group looking at that. But they're so far from where they'll need to be to write purchase orders that will make this industry scale the way that I think the investors and the street wants it to. I thought I'd come here and be a big bucket of cold water and just rain on the parade for 15 minutes, and then you can go back and we can all be enthusiastic about everything. To just talk about what it's going to take to get there, because that's just one conversation I don't see a lot of people having. So this is a slide that this very eager analyst works for me put together. It's cool. It's very pretty. Drones are the digital frontier. I actually think that's it reads nicely. I mean, there are almost 2 billion smartphones in the world. I think that's probably the real digital frontier, and still plenty of money to be made there and opportunity. But clearly, drones are right behind that. And I think, the reason why there's a yellow box in the middle is that's where I want to draw everyone's attention to, which is the question of business value. That's the whole game, business value. And it seems such a simple 2 words, and yet when I sit down with the CIOs and CTOs and innovation leaders of all these big companies that have really big checkbooks and are looking for the next thing to bring inside their company to change their value chains, or you name it, they don't always go to that yellow box. They go around it. They look at all these other cool things, that they don't ask the seminal question: what's the business value, and can we execute? What's it going to take to get there? And that's the same reason why a lot of technology innovations don't take off inside enterprises. They just don't think about it in that sort of business value or user-centric sort of way. Now, I have a lot of respect for this man. I've never met Aaron, but I've read a lot of his stuff, and I think he's one of the sort of visionary IT leaders that realizes the synergy between these devices, whether they have wheels or rotors or whatever they are, and how they're going to feed his business. And I give him a lot of credit for recognizing early on, the role that drones could play. So I think that's pretty cool. But I think it comes down to this question: what is my purpose as a drone? I use drones. I don't use UAV because I just think that's kind of boring. So I stick with drones, and I'm sorry if that's not the sort of the right vernacular. But what is my purpose? Is my purpose to deliver pizza or beer, which looks good on YouTube? I'm not sure how practical that is. Is my purpose to promote conservation or environmental management? That seems to have a lot of traction. Is my purpose to entertain? Is my purpose to be in journalism? Is my purpose to assess and to fly over real estate and to take pictures or construction sites? This is the starting point of the conversation. Not what vehicle does he have, not what's the battery life, not what's the dimensions of the camera or the quality of the gimbal, but what is the purpose of bringing this technology into our enterprise? And that's where, when we have that conversation with clients, it's a good conversation, but they often get stuck on that, and they want to go back to the machines or the devices. And that's exactly what you saw in sort of around the smartphones, right? If you go back to sort of the explosion of smartphones in the enterprise, it always came down to BYOD. For those who don't know what that stands for, it's bring your own device, not bring your own beer or BYOB. It's a different one. But bring your own device became very popular in enterprises, and now today the vast majority of companies do in fact let you bring anything you want to work. Not so much 5 years ago, but today, yes. But it's all about a device, not what it does, not what's on it, not the value it's going to bring to me. And so what's really fascinating as an advisor to these companies is as I cycle through the Fortune 500, the vast majority of them have addressed the device question. And the vast majority of them have not yet answered this question, even for their phones, which is, what's the purpose of supporting a phone in our enterprise? How's that going to make our business better? Right? And that's why you see a lot of opportunity, but also a very limited amount of adoption of some of the sort of next generation applications and things. And that is a canary in the coal mine for this sector, because it's really the same problem. So I don't know, I got to figure there's got to be a few people in here that's seen the movie Tron. This seems like it's the right crowd, right? And you see the latest, you go back to that movie, and there's that scene when the young man is in his first fight scene, and he has a little cut of blood, and the blood a little drop of blood hits that glass, and all of a sudden it goes quiet. It's like, user, and they realize they've got a user in the room, and it's sort of what happens at a help desk when an employee walks in. And this is the problem. The reason why this industry won't scale is not because the technology is not fantastic. It's not even the FAA. It's not fair to point to regulators. It's not the laws. It's not the lawyers. The number one reason, and actually I know Chris Anderson didn't make this morning, but he had a recent an article a few months ago, and he's obviously very, very prolific and interviewed often, and I read one of his pieces. And in this one piece, he talked about, someone asked him, what do you think is the main reasons? What do you think is the main reason this industry won't scale from a commercial perspective? Because I think the consumer side is taking off quite nicely. And as I recall, he said he thinks there's 2 reasons why. Number one, because of the selling channels. It's too complex. We've got to make it easy for people to buy this, and it's not there yet. That's a fair point. Number 2, he talked about just making it easy to use, the usability in general, right? Sort of these end-to-end solutions. And certainly 3DR and DJI and a lot of these companies are at the leading edge of these zero-opter self-flying potential, where you really, an idiot can operate these machines. And I agree with both of those. Those are both accurate, but I don't think those are the number 1 and 2 reasons why this industry won't scale. So yes, those need to happen. And other things need to happen, but this is the number 1 reason. And that is, even if you do everything right, you get the regulations, clarified, and you get the machinery so elegant and the software so well coded that, even a child can operate it. It doesn't mean that the corporations in the world are ready to buy them and deploy them and scale them at the cadence that we all want. That's in the business plans that the VCs are funding. And we're going to talk about, we'll go into some specifics on that. So again, I've talked about the enterprise mobility, and let me just be specific. So some of the analysts refer to us as being in the third wave of the enterprise mobility space. I agree. I mean, things have matured in 7, 8, 9 years. So there are companies that are just way out in that upper right-hand quadrant with really cool app stores they've built in-house, and they're custom designing apps. I've even seen enterprises toying around with DIY app platforms where employees can create their own apps within the enterprise, within these sandboxes of security. There's centers of excellence of design. Even SAP, which is a company that's never really been known for great design and user interfaces, right? You go back 5 years ago, and people want to pull their hair out when they hear they're getting SAP. But today, SAP is all over design. Okay, apps. I mean, just type in the words design and SAP, and you will see they've launched a global center for user design. That's all they want to talk about. It's in every other press release. They get it now. They appreciate that that's where technology needs to be, right? So, and yet, despite that enthusiasm on the vendor side, and despite the tremendous innovation on the device and the manufacturing side, I would argue that maybe 1% of the market is in that third wave. Because as I go to my clients, maybe 1 out of 100 has that. The vast majority of companies are rolling out their first app. They don't have an app store. Most employees can access email, but that's pretty much all they can do. Maybe they have a Salesforce application on their phone, but pretty much the majority of the workforce does not feel empowered or enabled to use their phone to do anything other than respond to a message. Why is that? I mean, look at all the innovation going on. Because they focused on the machinery and the technology, and they took a tech-centric view. They didn't ask the question 8 years ago, what's the value? Let's focus on that. And that's why we are where we are with mobile phones. And so I think the lesson learned for us is let's not be here 8 years from now, right? Let's have more sophisticated conversations with our customers. Let's help them reach a point of maturity. And even though these are not fun questions to have, these are difficult conversations to have, let's do that. Let's have those difficult conversations sooner, because there's this journey they need to go on to buy this stuff. And it's actually going to require a lot of internal change management, a lot of tough conversations. And I'll relate a conversation I had just yesterday. So in my office in Oakland, I had the innovation team from one of the world's biggest manufacturers in the ag space, and they were visiting Silicon Valley, and they're doing their little exploration of drone companies and other things. But they wanted to talk about drones, and so we did. And we had the chief innovation officer and other senior executives there, and we're going through the thing, and they've got some pilots going on. They're talking to companies. They're doing what you would expect of someone exploring the space. But I said, have you had a serious conversation with your general counsel? Have you sat down with your chief risk officer? Have you talked to your CISO, your chief information security officer? Have you talked to your head of HR? Have you gone through to really start to socialize with the key stakeholders in your company, all the things you're going to have to deal with to go from a really cool pilot or an idea to a fully scaled use? Not 2 drones or 10, but how about 1,000? How about something that's integrated into your value chain, into your supply, which is really what we want, right? We want drones to be completely seamlessly integrated, providing value up and down that value chain, whether it's the customer experience or it's the operations or workplace safety, whatever it is. That is not going to happen if you're just focusing on some small pilots. You've got to have these tough conversations. So as I come to a close, I would describe the real problem, the real opportunity as activation. Not innovation. There's huge amounts of innovation. We're in the breadbasket of innovation here. This is about activation. Most of the big companies that I know that are looking at pilots or looking at drones are doing small pilots run out of their innovation teams. That's a sensible first place to start. The problem is most of those innovation teams are not having hard conversations with all the stakeholders they need to go from a cool pilot with a business case to a fully scaled operation. So here's what's going to happen. They're going to finish their pilot. They're going to take their Section 1, 333 exemption. They're going to do their pilot for 6 months. They're going to come back with whoops, didn't mean to do that. They're going to come back to their fully written up business plan, and it's going to have all sorts of charts on it and pictures, and it's going to say these are the values. And the CEO or someone else or the CIO is going to look at this and he's going to say, well, that looks great. That's cool. So what's next? Have you spoken to the head of HR? Have you spoken to the COO? Have you spoken to their general counsel? Have you looked at vendors? Do we have a sense? Have you spoken to our insurance carrier? And the answer is going to be no, we haven't done that yet. We were kind of focused on the pilot. Well, then it'll be 2 years after that before you get your first purchase order, because no one's willing to have those hard conversations. It reminds me of a conversation I had with my son 2 to 3 years ago. He was 12 now. He came to me one morning and said, Dad, I got this great plan. I want to launch a radio station. And he had really thought it through. I mean, he had planned which of his friends were going to be the DJs and what songs were going to be on his list. This kid I was really impressed. But I felt terrible. I got about a minute. I felt terrible when I had to explain to him how the FCC kind of requires a license, and you can't just sell ads on the radio. Even if you could build a radio, you kind of have to pay the artists their royalties. I felt terrible. I felt like the worst father on the planet, giving him this, being like this purveyor of doom. It really broke his heart. So the reality is there's tremendous potential in this stuff, but you have to actually go through with your customers, with the buyers, with the companies, the hard conversations. You've got to pour water over the enthusiasm to the extent that you say, let's not just keep our heads focused on the pilot and on the use cases and on the potential. Let's start having in parallel those hard conversations that will enable us to scale and procure faster, so it's not 2020 before we hear about the first drone fleet. And that's my hope. And so I came here to be that purveyor of doom, because Patrick asked me, and now we can go back to the exciting, positive, upbeat conversations for the rest of the day. But anyway, so that was my message. So I hope that was useful, and thanks, Patrick, for allowing me to come.